The morning after my wedding, my new mother-in-law walked into my kitchen with a fountain pen already uncapped. She did not say hello. She slid a document across the table and said, "Let us keep this civilized. Sign the stewardship letter. Hand over everything your grandfather tucked away. In this family, you will not need it." I did not raise my voice. I did not blink. I simply looked at the silent notary beside her and understood they had rehearsed this before the vows. They believed silence meant surrender. They had no idea what my quiet was about to cost them. Before we dive in, tell me which country you are watching from, what time it is for you right now, and your first name. I read every comment. The sheets still smelled like lilies. The window was open to the marsh, and the tide breathed in and out like a sleeping animal. Julian's arm lay heavy across my waist. His breath warmed the back of my neck. He was dreaming, peaceful, unaware. We were in his family's coastal estate on Wren Isle, just outside Savannah. Tall, live oaks, pale water. Money that liked to be seen and never mentioned. I lay there and thought about the envelope hidden under the false bottom of my suitcase. I had carried it through airports, through rehearsals, through the ceremony itself. A seamstress had once stitched emergency thread into the hem of my gown. My grandfather had stitched a different kind of thread into my life. He called it Harbor Works, a quiet network of dry docks, salvage licenses, and river rights built over decades while the rest of my family told anyone who would listen that he had gone broke. He let them talk. He taught me to listen. "Never advertise your anchor," he told me one winter afternoon, while we shelled shrimp on his back steps. "People love to tug at what keeps you steady." He died 2 years ago, hands warm in mine, voice steady even then. Do not announce what is sacred until you know who is safe. That was his last sentence. I planted it in my chest like a stake. The sun pushed a pale blade of light across the ceiling. I eased out from under Julian's arm, slipped to the bathroom, and stood in the cool tile until my breath evened out. Day 1 of marriage was supposed to be coffee and crumbs and lazy jokes about jet lag. Instead, a knock came at the door. A housekeeper in a neat uniform lowered her voice. "Mrs. Harrow would like to see you in the music room." Not Mara, not even Mrs. Julian Harrow, just the title. As if marriage had erased my first name and stamped theirs where mine had been. The music room was sunlight and mirrors and the kind of piano no one touches. Evelyn Harrow, my new mother-in-law, sat with her ankles crossed and her pearls catching the morning. Beside her stood a notary. On the table, a leather folder, the silver belly of a seal, and an uncapped pen with a gold nib that winked as if it knew a secret. "Good morning, dear," Evelyn said in a voice that tasted like sweet tea and iron. "We keep our house in order. You will find this all very simple." The notary slid the first page toward me. "Household Mandate and Domestic Powers," the title read. The language was soft. The intention was not. I could hear my grandfather clearing his throat across time. I lifted the top page with careful fingers. "I will have my counsel review it," I said, easy as a tide change. A flicker crossed her face. Not anger, calculation recalibrating. "Of course," she said. "We are family. No pressure." I smiled. The way I used to smile at customers who thought my grandfather's old service station sold only gum and maps. The way I smiled when I knew where the real work happened. Behind the door marked, "Employees Only." That afternoon, I poured coffee for leftover guests, wrote down who had gifted what, and let the house swallow me like a calm sea. By dusk, we were back in the West Wing, a place that smelled like lemon polish and photographs. Julian loosened his tie. "Did you and Mother chat?" he asked, casual, tender, sure of his world. "Briefly," I said. "She loves a list." He laughed into my hair, warm and present. and I opened my suitcase while his back was turned. The envelope waited at the bottom like a heartbeat. Inside lay the trust papers and a letter in my grandfather's hand. Simple, upright, unapologetic. I held the letter a moment. "Thank you," I whispered, not to the past, to the part of me that had learned to be quiet on purpose. The next morning, the house was too still. No brunch laid out, no clatter of plates. A note in Evelyn's measured hand sat on the marble like a verdict. "Brunch postponed. We will arrange another day." The wedding gifts that had crowned the foyer were gone. "Storage," Julian said, kissing my cheek, already slipping into errands. The word felt like a glove pulled inside out. Later, the driveway gleamed with a silver coupe and a ribbon. "Your wedding present," Evelyn sang, handing me an envelope. The title card inside listed her as owner, not me, not even Julian. "You may use it, of course," she said. "Legalities are boring. We keep assets in the family." My smile did not move. My center did. That night, I placed the car key on the hall table and thought about anchors. I had always been easy to underestimate. It was my favorite disguise. When I was a girl, I believed the river could keep a secret. It held sunken anchors, old bottles, and storms with no names. My grandfather believed people were worse at secrets than rivers. "They cannot hold water," he'd say. "They leak through looks." I learned to watch the looks. In the months leading up to the wedding, I built a life that did not advertise itself. A modest studio, a desk at a co-working loft above an old brick bakery in town, a password that was a prayer. I registered a holding company with a name no one in my circle would connect to me. Sea Lantern Holdings. I liked that lanterns did two things well. They burned and they beckoned. Harbor Works was never flashy. It was a network of licenses, routes, and quiet contracts. A small fleet, a salvage arm, a piece of a dry dock everyone thought belonged to someone else. People assume wealth lives in mansions. Real wealth likes warehouses and filing cabinets. I spent one quiet morning at the loft while the city shook off a storm. My dashboard glowed in soft blues. Revenue was up. Contract renewals steady. A river pilot I trusted had messaged to confirm a berth we had waited on for a year. I opened a new page in my journal. Do not react. Observe. Protect. Wait. My grandfather's attorney, Mr. Calder, who wore linen in winter and never drank coffee after noon, had taught me to send documents in batches and silence in waves. We had updated the prenup twice, not to trap love, to protect truth. There was a clause I had insisted on after a long walk by the pier. If anyone attempted to shift, capture, or even temporarily consolidate assets tied to Harbor Works without board approval, an automatic freeze would rise like a seawall. I closed the laptop and stared out at the rain. Across the street, a florist was writing peonies on a chalkboard with a soft hand. I tried to imagine Evelyn writing the word peonies. I failed. By the end of that week, a pattern had emerged. A gift with the family name on the title, not mine. A household mandate that read like it had been drafted last year and printed the morning after vows. A friendly conversation about simplifying taxes that involved my house losing my name. In another life, I might have told myself I was being dramatic. In this life, I had paperwork. When I returned to the estate for one of Evelyn's famous Friday dinners, linen, candlelight, the hum of a jazz record that looked like it had never seen a scratch, the conversation slid over to gardens and caterers and a cousin's new investment in a boutique aquaculture startup. I listened. Listening is a form of heat. It softens the glue on other people's masks. Halfway through dessert, I placed my teaspoon down. I came across a filing this afternoon, I said, lightly. Harrow Advisory and Transition. Evelyn's eyes stilled the way the marsh stills before a storm. Julian chuckled, like a boy who had just lied to a teacher and gotten away with it. "She reads the registers," he teased. "I always do," I said, and tasted the way the room shifted a degree. Not colder, clearer. That night the moon pressed silver onto the river. I lay awake and listened to the house breathe. The next morning, I told Julian I needed fresh air, and instead of walking to the park, I rented a car under my maiden name and drove to the loft. I sent a wire from a clean account to Sea Lantern. I wrote myself a list. 1. Move sensitive contracts to the shell companies my grandfather and I had prepared. 2. Trigger the audit clause if anyone applied pressure to household deeds. 3. Stop saying maybe. Start saying no. At noon, a florist set a bucket of wild roses on the sidewalk. An old man rescued a wet newspaper. The world kept being the world while I tightened the lines others had loosened. I had no appetite for war. I had a talent for weather. The alert came while I was stirring honey into tea. A soft chime, a small banner on my phone. Joint account activity. I assumed groceries or a delivery subscription. I opened the app and the number made my stomach sit up. A setup retainer to Harrow Advisory. Not a token fee, a sweep, a sum that could fund a year of someone else's patience. I called Julian. He answered on the second ring, voice bright. "Hey, love." "What is Harrow Advisory?" I asked. A heartbeat of silence. A smile returned to his words. "Mother's firm, a small thing, we discussed it." "We discussed boundaries," I said. 2 signatures on any transfer." "Come on," he said, letting the boyish charm tilt the sentence. "We are married now. It is family money. Do you not trust me?" Trust is a word that often comes out when a hand is already in the drawer. I ended the call before I said something I could not swallow later, then opened the state registry site. I typed, I read, I took screenshots. Harrow Advisory had been formed 2 months before the wedding. Registered agent, Evelyn. Cosigner, Julian. Purpose, household asset transition. The word transition did not frighten me. It only told the truth, from me to them. I wrote Mr. Calder a short note, no adjectives. I attached proof. By dusk, Julian was making dinner like nothing had happened. He poured wine, told me about a friend's new boat, asked if I preferred a trip to the mountains or the coast for a short honeymoon when the calendar allowed. I smiled and asked questions. The easiest way to get a person to talk is to offer them silence shaped like interest. I did not bring up the money. I brought up a memory. "Do you remember what you told me when we first talked about vows?" I asked. He grinned. "That I am terrible at poetry and better at logistics?" "You said love is a promise we renew every day." I took a sip. I liked that. It sounded like maintenance, like care. He softened. "It is. Maintenance," I thought, "does not begin with a wrench on my foundation." Later, when he fell asleep watching highlights with the volume low, I moved through the house like it belonged to a sea wind. I placed a small camera in the study, its eye tucked into the curl of a ceramic shell on the bookshelf, another near the back hall, where whispered plans liked to catch and hold. I did not expect villains. I expected confidence when they thought I could not hear. That night, the walls kept their counsel. I did not. I opened a secure folder and highlighted the clause that had felt like paranoia when Mr. Calder and I wrote it. If any marital partner attempts to alter ownership, mandate, or control of protected trust assets through deed, fiduciary instrument, or transfer, an immediate protective freeze shall be enacted, and the matter referred to board review. Simple. Cold. Fair. The next day, Evelyn arrived with the notary who never smiled. She did not wait to be invited in. She was already inside most rooms in that house. She set down a single sheet, like a magician about to perform a trick she considered elementary. "A deed alignment," she said. "Sign, and your husband's household rights will be clean. We avoid confusion." The notary lifted the pen. The same gold nib, always uncapped. I held the deed at arm's length, as if the right distance might make it behave. My name was at the top, The transfer was below, to Julian and Eveline as joint owners. Confusion, I said lightly, is a generous word. Julian walked in barefoot, hair damp from a shower. It is nothing, Mara, he said, and kissed my temple like the period at the end of a sentence I did not write. Mother explained. She did, I said. You did not. Silence spread across the marble like a cool spill. I folded the deed and did not sign. Of course, Eveline said with immaculate patience. Take your time. The fiscal year is unfriendly to the lazy. After they left, I drove downtown and climbed the stairs to a small office between a consignment shop and a dentist whose sign had lost the letter E. A property lawyer named Ada Bell wore a navy dress and listened without interrupting. She read the deed twice. If you sign this, she said finally, you surrender control. They can borrow against it or sell without your consent. Your premarital trust would complicate that, but complications are for courts, not kitchens. I do not want a kitchen fight, I said. Then do not hand them the pan, she replied. When I reached home, a message from Mr. Calder waited. Received, he wrote. Initiating quiet review. If pressure escalates, we trigger. The word trigger looked out of place, like a hawk in a church. I let it stay. That evening, Julian suggested brunch the next day. Reset, he said, bright with a hope I did not recognize. Reset, I echoed, and agreed. I needed to see what he would be when the room was public and the plates clinked, and someone else poured the water. We met at a cafe that served toast on boards and charged for jam with a smile. He reached for my hand across the table. I want kids, he said suddenly, like he had been waiting to drop a heavy stone into a still pond. Soon. I want us to build something with a name that will outlast us. Which name? I asked gently. He blinked. Ours. Whose is ours? I asked, and did not rush to fill the space my question made. He looked away, then back, smile tight. We could place your company into a family trust, streamline things, taxes, legacy. Which family? I asked again, softer this time, as if the word might land differently if it wore slippers. Ours, he said, and the world around us kept being charming. The waitress set down citrus water. A couple laughed at the next table. Someone outside listed their dog's virtues into a phone. I held his gaze and let silence do what my voice did not need to do. That night, I slid my ring off and on while I read the prenup again, not as a wife, as a woman who had watched a river keep a secret and a house try not to. I slept for 2 hours. It was enough. In the morning, before the house woke, I emailed Mr. Calder one sentence. If they submit anything, freeze everything. Then I made coffee and scrambled eggs the way Julian liked them, creamy and slow, because kindness was mine, not a tactic, not a costume. Mine. The house at night had a particular honesty. Wood settled, pipes sighed. The river inhaled and exhaled beneath the windows like a patient animal. I lay still, my breath shallow, while a whisper threaded through the crack beneath the bedroom door. Julian's voice. Low. Urgent. A rhythm I had never heard from him when he spoke to me. No, she has not signed. She will. Leave it to me. No names, no details, just confidence. I slid my hand beneath the pillow and pressed the record toggle with the flat of my thumb. One line can be a lantern. It can also be a match. At dawn, the sky was the color of milk glass. I brewed coffee and cracked eggs and made breakfast exactly the way he preferred. He kissed my temple, put on his jacket, and told me to be good today. I told him I always was. When the front door clicked shut, I exhaled the breath I had been holding since the pen with the gold nib winked at me. I took the small cameras down, cataloged their files, and uploaded everything to a drive Mr. Calder had created for the sort of days you hope never arrive. Then I changed my shoes, gathered the deed Eveline had tried to make small with that word alignment, and drove to a downtown building with an elevator that protested each floor like an old man narrating his aches. Mr. Calder met me in a navy suit that looked like law on purpose. He did not waste my time with sympathy. "Play it," he said. I played the whisper. His mouth did not tighten. His eyes did. "Then we do not blink," he said. He unlocked a drawer and laid a slender file on the desk. "Your grandfather insisted on this language. I called it the founder's safeguard. He called it what he should have done the first time he let someone call him soft. Inside were two things: a protocol that would drop a freeze over every protected asset if a marital partner pressed a lever, and a short letter in my grandfather's handwriting, steady and relentless. If anyone treats you like a conduit, close the line. We can file the freeze quietly before noon," Calder said, "but there is a second step if you want it. You can move your voting rights to a silent proxy and pull them back with a signature when you need to, which would make it look, on paper, as if you own nothing for a window of time." "I already did," I said, and slid a signed document across his desk. His eyebrows lifted half a measure. He smiled without teeth. "You listen for a living," he said. "Good. People who listen outrun people who scheme." He drafted language, made 3 calls, asked me to sign my name 4 times in calm ink, and sent a courier with a sealed envelope and instructions I did not repeat even in my thoughts. Then he looked at me for a long moment. "I wish you did not need to be this prepared," he said. "I wish storms were polite," I replied. On the street, the morning had found its pace. A delivery truck kissed a curb. A woman set a tray of scones in a window. I walked to my car with the steadiness of someone who had finally stopped trying to convince a tide to change direction. That afternoon, a message pinged my phone. Not words, confirmation. The freeze had been logged, time-stamped, notarized, and delivered to the county clerk's office, the registry of deeds, and the trustee board that oversaw the old bones of Harbor Works. A wall had risen where a door had been. At the estate, a dinner plan materialized. Eveline liked to solve unease with linens, and I arrived on time in a dress the color of rain. She folded a napkin just so. She asked about floral vendors. She did not ask about the deed. That was how she asked. When dessert arrived, a lemon tart sliced too perfect to have been cut by a person, I rose to refill my water and passed by the hall table, where an old silver frame displayed a photograph of Julian at 8 years old, holding a fish larger than his arm. In the reflection of the glass, I saw Eveline reading my face while pretending not to. I smiled at the boy in the picture and decided to stop asking the river to be kind. That night, in our room, Julian reached for me and I let him kiss my shoulder, because I was still the woman who held kindness like a compass. But kindness, I had learned, also points to the exit. The next morning, I did not dress for a fight. I dressed for decisions: flat shoes, a cotton blouse, a notebook with a cover that did not announce itself. I sat at the kitchen table, hands around a cup that had gone cold, and waited for the day to do what it does best: reveal. Julian liked to move quickly when he felt control fray. He told himself it was leadership. He called it momentum. I recognized the species: speed as disguise. Late morning, an alert pricked the dashboard I kept open in a private window. Courthouse network detected on a known device. I did not call him. I did not rush downtown like a heroine in a movie, sprinting in heels and breathlessness. I opened my email and signed the last of the proxy transfers that would return every sliver of voting power from Sea Lantern to me within 1 working hour. Then I sent the founder's safeguard acknowledgement to the board with a single line: enact Phase 2 on receipt. Across town, he must have parked too fast in a space too tight. He would have smoothed his shirt, checked his hair in a glass door, and told himself this was housekeeping. Eveline would have told him to project certainty and tip his chin a touch higher than usual. He would have done it. He had been raised to. At the clerk's desk, the woman behind the glass would have looked up, recognized the last name, and returned to her computer without changing her posture. She would have typed in my name and the parcel number. She would have read the file and then turned her monitor gently toward him. This is what I imagined, because Mr. Calder's paralegal knew the clerk and sent me a message comprised of only 4 words. It landed on time. There are moments in a life when the future stops being a fog and condenses into a shape. Mine was a glass room 2 floors above a river I loved more than any chandelier. The board assembled around a table that reflected their faces back at them. No fuss, no flowers. Contracts, binders, 2 pitchers of water, and an old brass bell that had once hung on my grandfather's first dock. Mr. Pelham, Harbor Works counsel on matters that required a voice like a steady rudder, cleared his throat. On the matter of protective measures and interim control, he said, we have the Founders' Safeguard invoked and the Trustee Board's preliminary vote. Ms. Mara Arlen holds the necessary percentages to move forward. All in favor? One by one, hands rose. No drama. I signed where they needed me to sign. My ring caught the light. I did not look at it. Outside the river shouldered a barge west. A gull cut the air into neat triangles. Last item, Pelham said, sliding a second folder toward me. It had been sealed with red twine that remembered other hands. Your grandfather's private quorum. His directive was to open only when the board determined you faced a coercive event. Inside were documents that spoke fluent patience. Small positions in companies no one would associate with Harbor Works. Silent shares in a supplier I had admired and assumed beyond reach. Voting agreements that, combined, rolled into something my grandfather would have called a seawall. You control more than the room suspects, Pelham said, not unkindly. I do not want to win at a game I did not agree to play, I said. You are not playing, he replied. You are holding your ground. He rang the brass bell once. It sounded like a dock at dusk. Decisions recorded, amendments filed. I signed the last page and thought of all the rooms where I had been quiet, because quiet had been the only language anyone respected in me. I did not regret the quiet. I only regretted who assumed it meant vacancy. When I left the glass room, sunlight felt like a verdict I could live with. In the elevator, I let my forehead touch the cool mirror and memorized the woman who looked back. She was not angrier. She was finished pretending to be small in the presence of expensive confidence. At home, an envelope waited on the kitchen island, hand-delivered by a process server whose kindness showed in the way he set it down as if it might bruise. Not for me. For Julian. The petition did not announce itself with venom. It asserted boundaries. It offered a path that did not require fire to feel like heat. I placed a photograph on top of the envelope, a candid from the reception, a frame of us laughing under lights. In the background, Evelyn's purse hung open, and the tip of that gold nib pen winked in the corner. On the back of the photo, I wrote one line. You never asked what I carried. You just reached. When Julian came home, he found silence, the photograph, and papers that looked like a cliff. I was not there to watch his mouth form the wrong questions. He called me twice. I let the phone fall silent on purpose. There are times when the kindest thing to say is nothing. The next morning, in court, a judge with winter in his hair looked at the filings and then at Julian's attorney, who was talented at the kind of theater paper encourages. Her documents predate the marriage, the judge said. Her trusts are separate property. The freeze is lawful. Find a more productive hill. He tapped his pen twice, not gold, just useful, and moved to the next matter. Outside, the day smelled like rain. I stepped into it and let it touch my face the way blessing sometimes does, without pageantry. I did not pack in a fury. Fury is loud, and I wanted silence to finish what it had started. I made 3 trips from the house to the car, each measured like breaths counted at a bedside. Essentials only. The rest would be resolved by people who wore patience as part of their profession. Julian arrived as I carried the final box. His shirt was untucked, and he looked as if he had run without deciding where to go. Was any of it real? He asked. All of it, I said, which is why I will not let you explain my life to a ledger. He took a step toward me and stopped himself, as if a leash had tightened. He had always been good at holding himself just this side of an apology. You made me the villain, he said. You made yourself an investor, I replied. in a person who was not for sale. I walked past him and placed the box gently into the trunk. He stared at the ring on my left hand as if it were a word he had forgotten how to pronounce. I slid it off without flourish and set it on the hall table. It made a sound like a glass pulling away from a bar. Small, clean, final. That evening, a courier delivered a small package to the Harrow estate. Inside a velvet box lay the ring, nestled like an idea that had done all the work it could do. Beneath it, on a card of thick stock, 11 words. Next time, bring a capped pen, not a script. The following week, I moved into a loft with brick that remembered heat and windows that taught you what the sky was doing without asking. I did not celebrate. I hung a lantern by the door. My grandfather had taught me that a lit window was both a welcome and a boundary. It says, someone is here, and that someone decides. Work absorbed me with the particular mercy of work that matters. We inked a partnership with a small coastal outfit that had outlived bigger, louder competitors by knowing every sandbar by its nicknames. We expanded the scholarship that sent 2 river kids a year to study marine engineering without debt. We put a clause in every new contract that required vendors to pay on time or pay extra, and then we enforced it without apology. The company grew, not because of the fight, but because it had been built to weather people who thought storms were instruments. On a Saturday morning that smelled like rain on warm pavement, I drove to the old service station my grandfather had kept, even when others told him to sell. The pumps were gone. The bay doors were up. Inside, a group of volunteers were prying up cracked tile, and a woman from the library was sorting donated books into rough stacks. We were remaking the place as a community workshop, free classes on small engine repair, a corner for tools people could borrow when they needed, a shelf for lunch for anyone who walked in hungry. Not charity. Commons. While clearing a back wall, my hand found a brick that felt wrong under my palm. I eased it out and discovered an envelope stained with time. Inside, a photograph of me at 4 on his lap, grease on his knuckles, pride on his face. Behind it, a note. This is not an inheritance. It is a mirror. Build what reflects you, not what flatters them. I sat on the concrete and let my throat ache without tears. The lantern by the front door clicked in a breeze. Someone laughed by the bay. A girl asked if anyone had a smaller hammer. Life kept meaning to continue, and did. A week later, I saw Julian at a cafe. He looked thinner in the way men do when the scaffolding of certainty has been taken down. He approached my table and stood like a boy about to ask permission to leave class early. "Congratulations," he said, the word landing somewhere between a benediction and a bruise. "I hope it was worth it." "It was not a contest," I said. "It was clarity." He nodded, as if he wanted to challenge the sentence and could not find the part of himself that still believed in winning here. He turned and walked away without looking back, and the ache I felt was not loss. It was recognition that I had loved a version of him that did not survive contact with pressure. That night I drove to the river and sat on a bench under a live oak older than every marriage in the county put together. I lit a small candle in a jar and set it at my feet. Not mourning, marking. The wind moved through the leaves in a voice I had trusted since before I knew what contracts were for. The water held the moon like a coin and returned it, unspent. At home, I opened the window and left the lantern burning in the kitchen. It cast a soft gold on the floorboards that looked like a promise I could live with. I turned off my phone. I wrote in my journal. They thought quiet meant empty. It meant listening. The invitation arrived in cream cardstock with a crest pressed so deep you could feel its certainty with your eyes closed. Evelyn's note on top was neat, lacquered, polite in the way a blade is polite in its sheath. A benefit gala for the Wren Conservancy at the Harrow estate. Black tie, a short program. She added, almost as an afterthought, "It would mean a great deal to the family if you attended." The handwriting did not tremble. It never did. I went, not to make a scene, to hold a mirror. The lawn was a stage set. Lanterns threaded through the oaks, a string quartet under a white tent, glassware that refused to clink unless spoken to. People who remembered me from the wedding moved their mouths into sympathy shapes without risking words. Evelyn floated, collecting air from every conversation and setting it carefully back where it would serve her later. When the program began, the MC thanked the Harrows with practiced reverence. Evelyn stepped to the microphone. Pearl earrings, a silver cuff, a smile like the shoreline, inviting until the rocks. "Families protect what matters," she said. "Land, water, legacy." I let the lines sit. Then her voice reached for benediction. "And sometimes families must correct what threatens them. Quietly, with grace." I lifted my glass to my lips. I did not drink. When the applause softened, I moved to the edge of the platform where the staff hovered. I found the sound technician, thin, efficient, wearing the look of someone who had been blamed for every feedback squeal since childhood. "Would you play a clip for me?" I asked, showing him my phone. 10 seconds, clear as you can." He studied the waveform, then me, then the family gathered under white light. He nodded once. He did not ask why. People who work the wires can smell a story by the current it throws. When the MC invited a few unscheduled words from a dear supporter, I stepped up, not onto the stage but to the lip of it, the exact place where kindness and boundary shake hands. "I brought a small soundbite," I said into the microphone, voice even. "It is not a speech, it is a sentence." The technician faded the quartet. The lawn quieted, the way a river quiets before it takes something back. The clip played, Julian's whisper from the hallway, low and sure. "No, she has not signed. She will. Leave it to me." Nothing more. No accuse, no explain. Just the match. The air changed. People did not gasp. They recalculated. Eyes flicked to Evelyn, to Julian, then to me. I handed the microphone back, thanked the MC, and stepped down. On my way to the gravel drive, I passed Evelyn at close range. Her perfume was the scent of a garden that would not permit dirt. She did not touch me. She did not need to. "Cruel," she said softly. "Accurate," I replied. In the car, my hands did not shake. I rested my forehead on the steering wheel and let my breath know the body belonged to it again. At a red light, a kid on a bicycle darted past and popped the smallest wheelie, the kind that says, "I am still learning how to love gravity, and I am not done." Back home, I set a kettle on and stood in the pool of light the stove threw across the floor. I kept seeing the lawn, the cut grass, the open mouths that had not decided what to say. I wanted to hate the theater of it. I did not. Sometimes, truth arrives in a form the audience understands. The next morning, a rumor moved through town the way weather does. Careless and right on time. People said there was trouble at the Harrow house. They said a daughter-in-law had humiliated the family. They said it was a betrayal, a reckoning, an unkindness, a lesson. The river said nothing. It never does. It knows what people forget. The tide always comes back, changed. The petition for legal separation became a divorce filing without ceremony. Paper is very good at pretending to be the event. It is not. It is the instruction manual for what comes next. My lawyer, Ada in Navy again, sleeves rolled neatly, voice that never reached for power because it already had it, filed an emergency motion to formalize the founder's safeguard in civil court, so no clerk could be charmed into misfiling. We did not ask for fireworks. We asked for sequence. On the morning of the hearing, rain laid a soft hand on the courthouse steps. Inside, the courtroom air had the thin chill of places where truths are kept in boxes. Julian's side wore crisp charcoal and a polished confidence that made jurors in other rooms say yes before the question. Evelyn sat 2 benches back, a white scarf draped across her shoulders as if penance were something you could accessorize. The judge looked like a man who respected weather. He read, listened, asked 2 questions that revealed he had actually touched the documents with his mind, then set his pen down. "Ms. Arlen," he said, "your instruments are clear. The trust is separate property. The freeze triggered lawfully. As for counsel's argument that marriage by implication merged certain assets, no, that is not how implication works in this venue. If you want something merged, you bring a motion, not a breakfast conversation. He turned to Julian. Sir, if your mother is acting as your agent in matters that affect property not hers, her proximity to your confidence will not sanctify overreach. He banged the gavel once. Clean, not cruel. Evelyn exhaled in a single, contained breath, the way a swimmer does at the wall before the next lap. On the steps outside, reporters who had ignored the wedding leaned on umbrellas and tried to decide if this was society gossip or business news. Ada said nothing into microphones. I said nothing into cameras. Silence in public is not always surrender. Sometimes it is respect for the fact that other people have to eat the story later, and you do not need to season their food. That afternoon, a courier handed Ada a packet. Mutual resolution, Julian's counsel called it. A proposal, a way to step around the freeze and make everyone whole. The numbers were dressed like kindness. They were not. They were a hedge, an attempt to buy what the law had refused them. Ada slid the page back across the table without letting the paper warm under her hand. Declined, she said. We did not counter. We moved on. 2 days later, a smaller envelope arrived, addressed to me in Evelyn's hand. No counsel listed. Inside, a letter written in the script of a woman who learned penmanship as proof of character. You have done harm to my son, she began, and then took 6 carefully balanced paragraphs to explain that women who join families must learn to be shaped by them or be cast out like driftwood after a storm. I did not respond on paper. I wrote a sentence in my journal instead. Driftwood holds ships together when their ribs forget how. Work, as it had before, steadied me. We signed a lease on an extra warehouse upriver and offered flexible hours to welders who could not afford childcare by pairing employment with stipends for care on site. Our compliance officer sent me a note that said simply, "This is how you write policy with a spine." Late that week, I received a text from a number that used to mean home. Julian. Dinner? Just to talk. I sat with the word just. It has such tidy manners. It knocks softly on the door as if it only wants a glass of water, and before you can answer it has moved into your spare room and rearranged your pantry. I typed 1 hour, public place, noon, the Dockside Cafe. When I arrived, the host seated me near the window where the river made honest faces. Julian came in 2 minutes late, hair wet, tie askew. He looked like a man who had run in the wrong direction and was pretending he meant to. He did not order. He reached across the table exactly as he had at brunch and stopped himself an inch from my fingers. "I am sorry," he said, voice low enough to pass for humility if you did not know him. "This is not how I wanted it." "How did you want it?" I asked. He blinked. For a heartbeat, he looked young enough that I could see the boy at 8, holding the fish, proud and a little scared of the teeth. "I wanted you to trust me," he said. "I did," I replied, "until you asked me to sign my name into absence." He closed his eyes, opened them, then tried one last angle. "Mother is not the villain you made her." "I did not make her," I said. "She arrived fully formed." A gull landed on the railing outside and considered us with the beady, practical intelligence of scavengers. When the bill came, Julian reached for it and then didn't. Old instincts wrestled new facts and lost. I paid. When I stood, he rose too. "Will you hate me forever?" he asked. "Hate is heavy," I said. "I am tired of carrying your things." I left him there, with the river working its old magic, moving on while appearing still. It was a Thursday when the board flagged a discrepancy in a supplier invoice. Not error, pattern. A middleman company had begun inserting itself between us and a longtime coastal vendor. The name on the shell was innocuous, the address a mailbox in a building that rented identities by the month. Our auditor traced the registration back to a trust that, with 2 more clicks and a small favor from a friend who owed her, traced back to a Harrow cousin whose only visible skill was turning proximity into income. Eveline's signature did not appear anywhere. It never does. That is the trick. Proximity without fingerprints. I did not rage. I called the vendor I had known since I was 20. A woman named Bertie who wore sunblock like armor and called every boat she because boats, like people, behave better when you give them dignity. "Pull the contract," I said. "We will renegotiate directly. You keep your margin. We eat the middleman and call it a lesson." "Girl," she said, "you just made my month." "Make it your policy," I replied. Then I called Mr. Pelham. He listened without interrupting, and then asked a question so simple it loosened a knot I had not known I was holding. "Would you like this to end publicly or privately?" "Privately," I said. "If they let it." "They will not," he said gently. "So write the public ending with more mercy than they deserve. That way, you recognize yourself when it is over." The opportunity arrived without my help. The Wren Conservancy, bruised but under new interim leadership, announced a town forum on stewardship, land, and ethics. It was theater wrapped around policy, but sometimes theater is the only room people will enter. They invited me to speak. They invited Eveline, too. She declined and sent an op-ed to the paper instead about civility. The word clanged like cutlery on a plate already empty. The hall filled quickly. Fishers with hands stained by work, lawyers who loved precedent more than paper, wives who had signed things they would never forgive themselves for signing, daughters who had learned to read silence like scripture. I took the podium in a simple black dress and spoke about contracts as promises, not weapons, about money as a tool, not a leash, about how family can become a corporate form if you let its bylaws replace your name. Then I did something Eveline would call tacky, and I call necessary. I showed my work. I put documents on the screen, redacted where privacy demanded it, revealed where consent allowed it. People do not trust conclusions. They trust paths. When I finished, a man in the 5th row stood and asked what every room asks eventually. What should we do when the people who hurt us share our table? Move the table, I said, or build a different one. Invite only the people who bring food and not just forks. Laughter, the good kind, softened the air. As the audience thinned, a woman in her 60s approached, clutching a folder the way some people hold a rosary. Her eyes were red, but her voice had a spine. "I made the mistake you did not," she said. I signed. They took my name off my house and gave me back a room. I wish someone had stood up in public and said a sentence I could use as a door. "Here," I said, and wrote it on a note card. "Your signature is a deed to your future. Do not let anyone Xerox it for theirs." She laughed, then cried, then laughed again. Relief sounds like that when it is new. That night, after the forum, my phone lit with an unknown number. I answered because I was practicing saying yes to what I could handle. "Mara," the voice said. "Eveline. Silk over stone. You have had your performance. Are you finished?" "I am building," I said. "Performance is for people who need applause." "You are ungrateful." "I am unowned." A silence so pure it registered as sound. Then very quietly, a sentence she had not planned on saying. "I did not mean to raise a son who mistakes love for leverage." The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen and watched the lantern throw its quiet circle. It felt like a truce no one would sign. It felt like the truth, accidentally spoken by someone who loved control more than any person inside it. In the weeks that followed, our company's numbers told a story that money respects. Steady, solvent, sane. We cut 3 intermediaries, tightened payment windows, and broadened the scholarship to include apprenticeships for women who wanted to weld, pilot, or plan. I went to the river on Sundays with a paper cup of coffee and the courage to sit without checking my phone. One evening near dusk, a text arrived from Ada. Final decree filed. Clean. The word clean made my shoulders drop. I wrote back, "Thank you. Not for the paper. For the sequence that protected what the paper could not describe." At home, I opened the box that held things I keep for when the power goes out. Candles, a lighter, a radio that only works if you wind it by hand. I lit a single taper and set it in the window. The glass reflected a woman who looked like herself, not a version designed to be palatable in rooms with expensive echo. Me. I asked the quiet questions aloud, the way my grandfather used to when no one was there to mistake him for weak. What am I building? Who is it for? What will it do when I am gone? The answers did not arrive as words. They arrived as steadiness. Autumn worked its way into the marsh like a careful guest. The air sharpened, the light tilted, invitations multiplied. One envelope in heavy cream announced a charity auction to honor the waterways of Wren Isle. Host, the Harrow family. Beneficiary, the Conservancy. Dress, formal. I did not intend to attend. Then the program leaked. A-lot items sat halfway down the list. Private mooring rights on Lantern Cut. Package includes expedited permits. The description was artful. The promise was not. Lantern Cut belonged to Harbor Works through a chain of leases and agreements the public registry kept on paper too old to scan well. Expedited permits were not for sale, not legally. I called Mr. Pelham. He said 3 words I have heard only from people who fight storms for a living. Bring the file. I arrived at the auction in a black suit that refused to apologize for being simple. Lanterns glowed in the oaks. The tent was a soft white you could bruise with a look. People greeted me with air kisses heavy with questions. I gave them answers made of weather, polite, unreadable. When the lot before Lantern Cut closed, the auctioneer's smile widened a fraction. "Next," he sang, "a rare opportunity for those who love the water." A murmur rose like a small tide, the flip of a bid card, a chuckle from a man who had never piloted a skiff without help. "Point of order," I said, standing where light and shadow shook hands. I did not shout. The sound technician still wore the look of a person who knows where the wires run. He adjusted the gain without being asked. The tent quieted. "This item is not valid," I said, holding one page in my hand and the rest in a folder at my side. "Mooring rights on Lantern Cut are leased through Harbor Works under instruments that cannot be transferred by private party. Any promise to expedite permits is improper influence. The Conservancy deserves cleaner gifts." The auctioneer blinked. The donors looked at one another with the helpless smile of people who fear a stain on their clothes. Evelyn did not rise. She did not need to. She steadied her wineglass with the kind of grace that says, "The house is on fire, but we will not spill." I did not push. I placed a clean alternative on the table because I refused to live as a person who only ruins. "Here is what we can auction instead," I said. "A year of funded river cleanups with Harbor Works crews, 2 apprenticeship slots for local teens who want a future at sea. A real gift, not an invitation to break a rule." Silence hung for a beat. Then a boat builder in the back lifted his paddle. "I bid for the apprenticeships," he called, "and I match the cleanups." The room breathed. The auctioneer found his footing. The lot changed in the book with a scratch of a pen. Evelyn's jaw set. Her pearls did not move. On my way out, I passed her in the corridor lined with family portraits painted to look older than they were. She glanced at the folder in my hand. "You enjoy your little stage," she said softly. "I enjoy the river more," I replied. "It insists we take out what we put in." A reporter caught me at the steps and asked for a quote. I gave her one sentence a tired public could carry. "Transparency is not cruelty. It is maintenance." Back at my loft, I made tea and sat on the floor while the kettle clicked itself still. The folder lay open. Contracts, maps, photographs taken from a boat at low tide when the world tells you what it hides. I did not feel triumphant. I felt relief. Not because Evelyn had been checked in public, because a promise to the river had been kept in a place that liked appearances more than water. In the morning, a message from the interim conservancy director waited in my inbox. "Thank you for salvaging last night," she wrote. "May we plan the apprenticeships with your team this week?" I replied with times and names. Work, again, was the warmest room. I drove to the old service station on a gray Sunday and found 3 volunteers already pulling weeds through the cracks in the pavement. The bay doors were up. The air smelled like oil that had chosen memory over stain. On the back wall, the brick I had loosened once before waited like a small door. I slid it out and set it on the floor. Inside the cavity sat a second envelope I had missed the first time, tucked higher, paper softened by years. My name was on the front, not Ms. Arlen, just Mara in my grandfather's clear hand. I broke the seal with a thumbnail and unfolded a single page. "If they ever make you choose between being agreeable and being accurate, choose accurate and bring bread," he had written. "People listen better when you feed them after you tell them the truth." I laughed alone. A soft bark the room caught and gently returned. I thought about all the times I had let a table go hungry in the name of principle. I could do better at the small mercies. I called Bertie and asked what the kids in her crew liked to eat after long days. She said cinnamon rolls the size of both hands. I ordered 2 dozen from the bakery downstairs and carried them up the stairs with a box of paper cups and a thermos of coffee large enough to baptize a room. We ate. We planned the first 2 apprenticeships. We assigned mentors by temperament, not by convenience. We made a whiteboard list titled, "What We Wish Someone Had Told Us." Top line, "You do not have to know everything to begin." Midweek, a number I had not seen in months lit my phone. My mother. We had been estranged by a slow drift that did not have a name until the wedding turned a tide. I let it ring once more than polite before I answered. "Mara," she said, careful. She always began with my name when she did not know how to continue. "I am here," I said. "I read things," she said. "People sent me clippings. They said awful words about you and about her." "Evelyn has friends with long lists," I said. "It is all right." "It is not," she said, and for the first time in a long time, I heard the woman who had once taught me to thread a needle because repair is its own kind of love. She took a breath. "I did not handle your grandfather well," she said. "He kept secrets. I mistook that for judgment. You kept quiet. I mistook that for distance. I am sorry." I closed my eyes against a pressure I had not planned to feel that day. Forgiveness does not always arrive like a dove. Sometimes it arrives like a rusted hinge finally giving. "Thank you," I said. "I do not have the right to ask," she said, "but I will anyway. Can we start again? No speeches, coffee, a walk. We can talk about anything except money." "I would like that," I said. "Bring gloves. The station needs hands." She laughed, startled and young in that sound. "I have 2, she said. "I will bring both." After the call, I sat on the floor and let the room hold how complicated love is when it grows around old scaffolds. Then I went to work. We signed a contract with a small yard upriver that had once turned us away. They came to us this time. The clause about timely payments had traveled. Standards, it turns out, are contagious when enforced without drama. That night, the sky turned the exact color of the river mud at low tide. I set a candle in the window and read my grandfather's letter again. Bring bread. It felt like an instruction from beyond that was less mystical and more practical than I wanted it to be. I wrote a sentence I could use when my temper rose. Truth is a meal. Feed it warm. The final hearing did not invite spectacle. Paper rarely does once it has been taught how to stand. Ada wore gray, calm as rain. Julian's counsel wore confidence that had finally learned not to overreach. Evelyn did not attend. Her absence felt intentional, like a curtain someone refuses to draw even when the room is too bright. The judge read the decree with a voice that respected endings. He affirmed the founder's safeguard, the separateness of the trusts, and the permanent injunction against interference in HarborWorks governance. He addressed spousal claims in language so clean it could cut bread. Then he set the papers down and looked directly at Julian. "You are not the first person to confuse access with intimacy," he said. "You will not be the last. Make new mistakes next time. No lecture for me. No compliment. Just the steady application of law to fact." It felt like walking a pier that had been rebuilt to hold weight again. Outside, the air smelled like metal about to be rain. Julian waited near the steps. No tie. Hair in his eyes. He looked smaller, as if a story he had told himself had finally stopped cooperating. "I cannot fix what I broke," he said. "I will stop trying to take. That is the best sentence I have." "It is a good first sentence," I said. "Write more." He nodded once. He did not reach for me. He did not ask for what I would not give. He walked away with his hands in his pockets like a boy trying to keep a treasure from falling out before he knows what it is. I drove to the river and parked where the live oaks lean as if listening. The tide was halfway between coming and going. That is my favorite moment. The water shows you the line it intends to cross and does not apologize for changing its mind later. I thought about lines, the ones I had drawn, the ones I had erased, the ones I was still learning to see. My phone buzzed. Ada again. A brief message. All done. Clean record. I wrote back a single word. Gratitude. On the way home, I stopped for bread. Real bread. Still warm. I carried 2 loaves to the station. Volunteers looked up, surprised, and then laughing the way people laugh when the room feeds them and the work suddenly feels lighter. We ate standing up. We decided the tool library needed a sign-out system that did not rely on memory. We brainstormed how to offer a class in basic contract reading for anyone who had ever been handed a pen with the cap already off. I wrote on the whiteboard, "Bring your own name. We will guard it with you." Near sunset, my mother arrived at the bay door in work gloves and a coat she had owned since I was a child. She hugged me without explanation. We raked. We sorted. We did not explain our feelings into air that needed the room for dust. When we finished, she pressed her forehead to mine, the way she used to when I was small, and said, "I am proud you did not give away what was not theirs." On the drive home, I took the long way along Lantern Cut. The water held the sky like a promise only a river knows how to keep. I rolled down the window and let the cold air fill the car. A heron lifted from the reeds and moved like a letter being written by a hand that knows the word it needs. Back at the loft, I turned on the lantern in the kitchen and left the rest of the lights off. I poured tea. I stood at the window and watched small apartments across the street narrate their lives with shadows. A woman watered plants. A man practiced a speech to a mirror. A child in pajamas chased a dog that did not want to be caught. Ordinary. Luminous. I opened my journal and wrote 3 short lines I wanted my voice to remember when the next test came. Kindness is not surrender. Silence is not consent. Love is not a deed. Spring returned to the marsh like a promise kept. The air tasted new. The light arrived earlier and stayed as if it had been invited. I woke before the sun and walked the edge of Lantern Cut, the water black as ink before the sentence begins. In my pocket, a piece of paper so ordinary it could be mistaken for a receipt. On it, 3 lines I now live by. Kindness is not surrender. Silence is not consent. Love is not a deed. At the service station, the bay doors were rolled up to let the day through. Volunteers sorted tools. A girl in a borrowed cap practiced with a welder, the arc a brief star that made her grin. My mother swept the threshold like a priest, small motions that made the room holy. Bertie dropped off a box of bolts and a story about a storm that turned out smaller than it sounded. We ate warm bread with cold butter and called it breakfast because we decided it was. Work began. A boy with quiet eyes learned to coil a line without tangling his future in it. A woman who had signed the wrong paper once upon a time practiced reading a lease out loud until the words obeyed. We added 2 shelves to the free library, manuals, memoirs, essays with spines and sentences that felt like tools. Every hour someone laughed. Every hour, someone learned. It was enough. Near noon, a small package arrived addressed in a hand I recognized. Eveline's, slanted and exact. Inside, a single pearl earring wrapped in tissue, its twin missing since the night of the gala. No note, no threat, just a circle of light that once insisted on being seen. I set it on the windowsill where the sun could do what it does best, tell the truth about surfaces, and let it be an object without a job. In the afternoon, I drove upriver to the glass room and laid out a map for the year. 2 more apprenticeships, a scholarship for pilots who grew up on this water, a clause in every contract that says no pen is uncapped until both parties can name what they are signing for. We rang the old brass bell once, a sound like a dock remembering its work. No victory lap, just maintenance. That evening, I stood at my kitchen window and watched the lantern throw its steady circle across the floor. The city hummed its ordinary hymn, pans clinking, dogs shaking off rain, a saxophone somewhere insisting on a melody that did not ask permission. I touched the scar where a ring had lived and found skin, plain and whole. If you asked what I inherited, I would not say a company. I would not say land. I would say attention. The practiced, patient kind that hears the hinge before the door opens. The kind that knows when a voice says family, you must ask which definition it intends to use. The kind that understands a capped pen is not a threat. It is a boundary. I lit a candle and set it in the window the way my grandfather taught me when the power went out. Not to mourn, to honor. The flame leaned, corrected, and held. Outside, the marsh lifted its face to the moon. Inside, I wrote the last line of this chapter and did not dress it in ceremony. I kept myself. That is the legacy. Tomorrow, I am supposed to toast a friend's engagement at a rooftop party where money dresses as charm. Her fiancé's mother asked me, smiling, to keep it light. I smiled back. Then a server slid me the seating chart by mistake and I saw my name printed at a table I should never share. Tell me, do I bring bread and tell the truth, or let the champagne do the talking?